Welcome. We're doing Sota Daf Ches Amud Aleph and Emetz Hashem also Amud Beis till Ma'ariv. So the Mishnah which we had till now said several things regarding the location where the Sota is given the water to drink. We began and we said, let's go back for a second to the Mishnah, Shesham Mashkin by Shar Nicanor, by Nicanor's gate, is where they would give the Saites, the suspected Saites, the water to drink. We know this, or it makes sense to say this regarding Saites, that it would be by the gate of Nicanor, because it says the Kohen will put her in front of Hashem. Mitzeira'in Nami, also those that are lepers, and they have to bring their carbon after being purified or in the process of being purified. But we find the same thing regarding a woman who has given birth and now she has to bring a carbon. We also say that, or we assume that we say that she should be by the Shar Nicanor as well. How do you know that? What's the reason for it? If you want to say it's obvious, because they come and they have to stand over their carbon. There's a concept that when a carbon is being brought on someone's behalf, they have to be there in order for it to have the desired effect, at least according to some opinions, and give them the purification that they need. Because we learned in a brayso that a carbon of a person is not going to be offered unless they are standing over the carbon, meaning they're there. So, if you want to use this rationale to teach us that Mitzayrayin are also there by Shar Nicanor, Zavan v'Zaves Nami. If so, then Zavan and Zaves as well should need to stand there. And we don't find, or it's not mentioned, that they stand by the Shar Nicanor. And if the Gemara Enachanami, that's true. The Zavan and Zaves, which are a different type of impurity, they also need to stand by Shar Nicanor. Rather, V'tana Chada Minayu Nakad. But the only thing is that our Tana, he just mentioned one example. He's not going to use every single type of carbon necessary or person required to bring a carbon and go through each one and tell us that he has to be by that they have to stand by Shar Nicanor. So you have it by those are the pasuk refers to it. The Hamad Isa Kain Lefnei Hashem. That's the Mishnah is telling us. It's giving us one other example of Zavin v'Zav of Mitzayrayin, and from there we learn for the Zavin and Zavis as well. When let's assume that we have two women that are suspected of Saites, you don't give both of them to drink at the same time. You do each one gets administered the water on their own. Why? According to the Tanakama of this brayso, the reason why you don't do more than one woman at the same time is because you don't want her to feel too proud. Our goal is that she should admit, and then she won't have to drink the waters of the Sota, and she can't stay married to this person. She doesn't get the ksuba and so on, but at least she won't drink it and she won't be killed. We always try that she shouldn't have to get the punishment. In this case, there are no witnesses, so she's not going to get the court is not going to give her any punishment. And the problem is, if you have a second Sota there, let's assume that the second Sota is truly innocent, and therefore she's insisting, I'm innocent and I'm not going to admit. And the Kohen, as we'll see, tries to get her to say, listen, people make mistakes in life, just admit and move on. And if she sees her friend is truly innocent not giving in, then she may also not give in. So in order that she shouldn't feel proud or emboldened based on her friend, we say, don't have her drink the water with someone else. Rabbi Yehuda says this is not the reason because we don't want her to be emboldened. Ella, Amakra, Isa. The Torah says, when it says administer her the water, it says the Kohen should give it Isa to her. We learn Isa, her, singular, levada, alone. And you can't just bring in other Saitas at the same time. Tanakama, it says Isa, so why are you giving me an explanation of why you can't do more than one Saita at a time? Because you have a problem. We don't want to embolden her. It says Isa. Why is he giving me another reason? After the Gemara, Tanakama Reb Shimon. Who is the Tanakama? It's Reb Shimon. And Reb Shimon has an interesting way of learning. The Darish Taima Dekra. Reb Shimon is someone Tam Dekra. Reb Shimon explains reasons for psukim. Umatam ka'amar. He's not telling you the real reason. He's telling you what's the reason why Torah said Isa, which means levada, and you can't give another Saita with her, is so ultimately, Reb Shimon and Tanakama agrees that the real reason is because the pasuk says Isa. And why does he give a different reason? He's explaining to you the reasoning of the pasuk. Why does the pasuk truly say Matam Darish? My Beinayu? What's the difference between these two? Ultimately, Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda are saying the same thing, that you can't give a Saita more than to drink more than one Saita at a time. If she is shaking, you have a situation where the woman is trembling, she's standing there and she's afraid, she's really, really scared. In such a case, we're not afraid she's going to be emboldened by her friend who's innocent, who's not admitting her guilt, because she's freaking out. She's not emboldened in any way. So the difference would be, if you say the reason is because she shouldn't be emboldened by a reiteses, you would allow to have more than one site at a time. But if the reason is because the pasuk says Isa, and that's it, like Rabbi Yehuda says, then you don't. It doesn't matter if she's trembling or not. How could you say that? Could you give a woman that's trembling? Could you give her water to drink? Well, together with another one. We have a principle in Torah that you don't batch together mitzvahs. It's disrespectful to say, I'm going to do a bunch of mitzvahs together. How do you know this? We have a clear Mishnah, the Tanan. The Mishnah says you do not give water to drink to two seites at the same time. And you don't give two lepers that have to be purified. You don't do the process, the two at the same time. And if a slave who wants to remain in servitude for more than 6 years until Yevel, there's a process of going to Bezdin and drilling a hole in his earlobe. You don't piercing a hole in his earlobe. You don't do that to more than one at the same time. And the same thing is regarding Varufa. You don't do two at the same time. The Mishnah says clearly, we have this concept that we don't want to do more than one mitzvah at the same time. It's disrespectful. So even if she's not trembling, you're still not going to do two saitas at the same time because of this clear Mishnah and because of this reasoning. So what is really the difference between Rav Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda? Abaye said, it's not a question. It depends. The Mishnah says you can't do two saitas together, which implies even a reitesas, even one that's trembling, she's very scared. That's if you only have one kohen. But if you have more than one kohen, you could have one kohen doing it over here and another kohen doing it next to her. Because it's two different kohenim, it's not called chaviles. And in such a case, if she's not reitesas, then Reb Shimon the Tanakama would say that you could do it to her at the same time. We're not afraid that she's going to be emboldened by her friend maintaining her innocence because she doesn't have the guts. She's nowhere near being emboldened. Okay. So the answer is if it's one kohen or two kohen. The Mishnah continued and said the kohen holds on to her clothing and basically uncovers her hair, pulls her clothing a little bit. It's a shameful experience for her, and that's what's done. We looked at him in a brayso. The pasuk says they should uncover her hair. We only know about her head. What about the rest of her body? It says the woman, which implies more than just her hair. Why does Torah have to imply reisha if it's really more than that? It's ha'isha. So it means that if she had certain braids or whatever in her hair, he undoes it. In certain cases, he would not uncover her chest. So you see from here that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that we don't want. There's pirchei kahuna. There are certain kohanim that were always around the azara, and if certain levels we want her to go through a shameful process to make sure that no one else does the same thing that she did, no other woman sin. But the problem is if you're going to be immodest with her, not immodest, but if you're going to do these shameful things and cause some level of immodesty on some level, it potentially causes hirhurim, which are bad thoughts, improper thoughts, by those kohanim that are around. So therefore, it's not done. Are the Rabbanon not concerned about hirhurim, and they don't have this concern. They don't say that. If says don't do it, if in certain cases, Chachamim don't say that. Are they not concerned? But we heard the opposite. And in other words, we know from other places that Rabbanan are concerned about hirur. The Tanya, we learned in a brayso. Ha'ish mechasen eise perek echad milfana, ha'ish shnei brakim echad milfana, echad malchareha. Meishekula erva. When it comes to administering punishment for someone is getting stoned to death, so the Gemara over there, the Brayso discusses the process. They disrobe him, and if it's a man, he's covered in the front. If it's a woman, she's covered in the front and in the back. And the reason is they should kula erva. Rabbi Yehuda. And over there we have a similar machlekes, slightly different though. Rabbi Yehuda says that a man could be stoned disrobed, but a woman is not. And sorry, that Rabbi Yehuda says they always get covered, and Chachamim say only a woman gets covered, a man does not get uncovered. So you see from here that Chachamim are concerned about hirhur, and in our brayso about Sota, it seems like if the real reason is because, according to what Rabbi Yehuda is saying, if we're explaining that because it's chayish lehirhura, Chachamim are not chayish. They clearly are concerned about it. What's the reason over here? The issue over here is like this. Sota is different than skila. When are you afraid of these koyanim having improper thoughts? She may come innocent, right? She drinks the water and she walks out innocently. And because of the state that she was in, less than perfect modesty, there's hirhurim, and now certain people are going to run after her. And she's married. And the young koyanim are going to have issues with the Yetzer Hara. But Hassam over there by Skila, Hamistalka, she's passing away. We're not concerned about hirhurim if she's killed. She's being administered the stoning, which, by the way, as the Gemara says further on, this wasn't done in a very long time, because once the Sanhedrin was abolished, unfortunately, there was no administering of death penalty. And if you're going to say, yes, she was killed, but you got them in a certain mode and they're having improper thoughts, and it may cause them to misbehave with another woman. So this one's not available, but someone else is. So Gemara says a principle. Amar Rava. Rava says, Gimiri, we learned the Yetzer Hara only controls a person based on what they see. But the fact that they saw something, it's not going to apply that to a different situation. And because what they saw is being killed, therefore, we're not as concerned about the modesty. Obviously, in halacha, one is concerned whether it's Masha'in of Reyes or not Masha'in of Reyes, one is concerned about the Yetzer Hara, and not to see what he shouldn't see. So clearly from here you see there is a contradiction between the Yehuda of the first of our brayso and the Yehuda about the halachas of skila. And for the Gemara, leikasha. Sorry, Amarava the Yehuda leikasha. From the Yehuda, there's no question in Kiddushinon, as we learned, as we just answered, that you don't have a question about the contradiction of the Rabbanan. As we explained, and the Rabbanan is also not a contradiction between both cases of the Rabbanan, because why in the first case do you say that by skila we said that a ish is called alam ve'ena isha, and in our case we said that he does uncover her. Over here, the reason why by Sota we say that is because we want to create a certain experience, if you will, that other women shouldn't sin. They should think twice. But by skila, we're not trying to do that. By the case of skila, we're not trying to send a message by the way it's done that other people shouldn't sin. The fact that skila, stoning, is happening, that's the biggest message. And if you say, hey, 1 second, let's go all the way. Let's shame her and kill her. So why are you saying because she's being killed, we shouldn't disrobe her a little bit? Rav Nachman answers, very interesting thing. You may have heard of it. Pasuk says, you should love your fellow like yourself. Be nice. Avas Yisrael. And therefore, choose for them a more pleasant or a nicer death. It's not, because it's being killed, who cares? Yes, they're being killed, but if they're killed without clothing, it is less shameful, or according to others, it's they die quicker. Let's say that this is Rav Nachman, but it's a Machlekes Tanoim. Everyone holds according to Rav Nachman, but here's what they're arguing about. The Mar Savar Bizgene Adif. Some say that her shame is more valuable to her. In other words, they ask a person, but they won't be so embarrassed because they're wearing clothing, or would they have an easier death, so to speak, but they're going to be embarrassed? So according to one opinion, he would rather have less shame than more pain. Another one holds that no, he would rather have more pain than shame. It's a question. It's a difference of opinion. It's an argument. How important or how much pain are they willing to endure not to be shamed? Which again, in the theme of Ahavta L'Recha Kamecha, it shows us how important one has to be not to embarrass another person. There's even an opinion that a person would rather have more suffering, physical, with his body, but have less shame, even in a case where he's being killed for transgressing something, and this is obviously a case that he was warned, and there were witnesses, and so on. But even then, it was rare. If she was dressed in white clothing, so they would change her. In other words, if she wore white, which means that's the beautiful way of dressing, they would have her change into black. If she wore black, they would have her change her into white. We learned if black happens to be very nice for her, then they would exchange it for something which is not so nice. If black was nicer, they would put on something which is not nice. The point is, she shouldn't be all fancy and nice. If she had certain golden jewelry on, they would take it off. And the Mishnah goes on to details if she had necklaces or earrings, whatever else, they would take it off. Pshita, it's obvious. Why did the Mishnah have to tell us this? Obviously, you're trying hashto nivli minavela. You're trying obviously to embarrass her. That's part of the process, right? You uncovered her hair, and you tie a rope above her chest and chevel mitzri, an Egyptian rope. It's not a prominent sight. Obviously, you're taking off her jewelry. I would have thought that you ever saw the Gemara has an example of this, that I would say perhaps if she's wearing jewelry and disgusting clothing or somewhat disrobed, it's more shame than if you're not wearing jewelry. A person is not wearing clothing, but he's wearing shoes. It's more shame when a person is just wearing a tie and nothing else. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain level, a person's wearing shoes and nothing else, it's more shame. So maybe if she has jewelry, then I would think it's okay because we're doing other things to her clothing that she is embarrassed. And the embarrassment is stronger when she has jewelry on top of that. Kamash Milan says the Mishnah, no, that if she's wearing any type of gold clothing, whatever, gold jewelry, take it off. Afterwards, they bring a rope. What's the din? Rabbi Abba asked Rav Huna, let's assume that we don't have this Egyptian rope. Is that a problem for the process of Sota? Do you say, if the whole reason is for modesty issues, that if you're not going to tie her with a rope, but you open up a little bit of her clothing, that you need a rope that shouldn't fall down, and then if you have a little clip or something, that's enough as well. You don't need an Egyptian rope. Or do you need it? Or do you say that because as we learned, that we have a process of midah connected midah, which means she's experiencing or being punished with the same measurement, the same type of sin that she did, and she put on these fancy belts or whatever to sin with this person. So therefore, we also wrap a unfancy belt around her, or a shameful belt around her, to give her that measure for measure based on what she did. If that's the case, if so, then it's ma'akiv. So it's not enough to have a little clip. You have to have a similar or an opposite type of rope. We learned what it answers, we learned clearly that we have to tie a rope on her in order that the clothes should not fall off. And because that's the answer, yes, there are other reasons and Muslim homiletical explanations that it alludes to, but the ultimate reason is that her robe shouldn't fall off. And therefore, even a tziltzil cotton, some kind of a clip or belt or whatever, would be enough. Anyone that wants to come and see should see. Basically, they should witness the process of the Sota. Go for kasha. Oh, Marta, you said you said anyone that wants to come and see the process of the Sota, come take a look. It's open. The problem is, which implies it doesn't matter if it's men or women. And then we learned all women are allowed to come and see her, which implies women yes, men no. Rabbi says, answer this, that it means specifically when it says kol araya, it means dafke men. Anyone wants to see comes and see. Katani. We said anyone. Don't say it's only men. So the Gemara answer is no. There is no difference between men and women. They're both allowed to come and see her. The only difference is that for women, they're chayavim l'reisa. Because the pasuk says they should all see it, and they shouldn't. It's the pasuk in Yecheskel, and they shouldn't do this type of immoral behavior. So what it answers that men and women are allowed to, and women are required to. We'll stop here by this Mishnah for Maidiv, and the lesson is V'hafta l'recha kamecha. Thanks for watching. See you, Mitzvah Hashem, soon.